it's kind of interesting stuff. What else can we talk about while we're on it? Neo-Nazis in Mongolia. Everyone's signing up. Chavez, Indian Nazis, Mongol Nazis, the whole world's Nazis except white people. Let's see here. Let's see what else we can talk about. We covered Hal Turner. We covered. Hopefully, we get it through our heads that no talking about playing basketball. We gotta play baseball. Practical politics, non-voting politics, obeying the law, basically. Oh, ancient carvings reveal Pharaoh's Dark Age. Yeah, there's a Dark Age of the Pharaoh. Very interesting stuff. A Dark Age of the Pharaoh. The Hyksos. Most of you have never heard of the Hyksos, but maybe you have. Hyksos. Foreign rulers. They came in and basically toppled Egypt. They came in and they never took the whole thing, but they came in and they're very weird people. They kind of took the place, then said, we're going to be Egyptian. We're going to run things. It'd be as if a bunch of white people went and took the Zulu and came in and took Zulu and said, you know what, we're going to be the chiefs of the Zulus. They were kind of jealous of their civilization. They're always, in an article that's pro-Hyksos, and you're going to hear a lot about this tribe, these Asiatic people who invaded Egypt during the 12th dynasty. If it's pro-Hyksos, they're going to say, oh, they brought chariots to Egypt, like Egypt couldn't go to the Hittites and find themselves some chariots and whatnot. Egypt didn't have much of an army at the time because Egypt didn't have any enemies. But once the Hyksos came, they toppled the place. Egypt, it took them a century to straighten it out. And then once they got back in charge, they pretty much went full out into war. The Hyksos pretty much got kicked out of there under scorched earth strategy. Then they went apparently to this little city you might have heard of, Jerusalem. And then some turncoat Egyptian priests, I guess, let them back in there. Yeah, they turned coats and let them back in there, and then they were there for about 5 centuries and ran the place right into the ground. And then there was another scorched earth fight. But they never ran the whole thing, but they did. They were called the Shepherd Kings. And they were very weird. They weren't interested in killing off the Egyptians. They were just interested in running the place and being Egyptian. Very weird stuff. But a lot of attention's on this tribe, this Hyksos. And their leader that got cut in half by one of the Ramses. Yeah, one of the Ramses killed him, which is interesting. Their god was Set. The god of the Hyksos was Set, or the red hippopotamus. But I'd pay attention to that word, Hyksos. Any type of pro-Hyksos will be, oh, they brought chariots and weapons of war to Egypt, but Egypt didn't really have a whole lot simply because they didn't have any enemies, and they didn't have, if you don't have any enemies, you don't have an army. Egypt was like a nation of priests or something. But they sure did after that. Hyksos brought in slavery too. Yeah, Egypt didn't have much slavery or anything like that. Hyksos brought all that in. They were dragging up slaves from Africa and everything else, supposedly. But there's a lot of tension. Their capital, we still use the word for their capital too. The Hyksos made their Nile Delta capital was by the name Avaris. A-V-A-R-I-S, and that's why you have the word avarice to this day. Some of the heavy fighting that these carvings were found in Avaris, apparently, in the Sinai Peninsula, some of the heavy fighting was there, and it was scorched earth with these devils. But they came in out of nowhere and blindsided Egypt, and then they got kicked out of there, and 100 years after that or something like that, they came back in, and they were called the Shepherd's Kings. They ruled part of Egypt for like 5 centuries, and finally the Egyptians kicked them out of there, but nothing was ever the same. They had brought in slavery, they had done all kinds of stuff. And that pretty much, in my opinion, started this Dark Age, the coming of the Hyksos. But I'll give you a few guesses on who a lot of people believe the Hyksos are, or who the Hyksos were. I'll give you a few guesses. Some even claim that certain elements of European royalty are not legitimate, that they come to this, the Hyksos, interesting enough, were called Haiburu, and I don't know how to pronounce it in Egyptian, but apparently Ramses called them parasites. They were a sign of the plague sent by the red hippo. Interesting, huh? Yeah. But look for more information about these, but there's information coming out. This is on Discovery News. Ancient carvings reveal Pharaoh's Dark Age and the Hyksos. Because not a lot of information. No one knows what happened to them. No one knows where they disappeared to. No one knows who they possibly could have been or who they are now. Interesting, isn't it? But when they came in the second time, they did something a little bit smarter. They started breeding in with them. They started actually becoming Egyptian, at least in looks and appearance. They were always kind of upside down. But it was very weird. These people came in and tried to take over and tried to become them. Very weird stuff. But that's that old God. And they of course ran an open borders. Yeah, they opened Egypt's borders, and everyone was coming in there, and it was all kinds of riffraff and everything else. But that again is that old red hippopotamus. Their God is Set, and that is the imagery for Set was the red hippopotamus before Horus the Avenger slew him. Big red hippo, chaos, everything upside down. But I'll end that, and we'll go on to talking about some interesting stuff on the blog. Before we go into some blog type stuff, I'm going to read from you the blog again. There's some interesting articles on this. I'm going to talk about economics, and I'm going to point out practical politics, a little brief lesson here. I'll do that first. Most of you have heard of Blackwater. Blackwater is like a pretty much mercenary type group, very neoconish, Christian Zionist, neoconish, maybe even Jewish, I don't know, but it's neoconish, that's for sure. And they're either being taken apart and reorganized, or someone's taking them over, or they're just taking them down, period. I'm assuming they're going to be taken apart and reorganized or something. But the way they're doing it, the way they took them down, the way they're taking them down, is not through any type of traditional cowboy fight. It's they're taking them down through full spectrum practical politics, non-voting politics. There's tons of legal investigations. There's tons of different legal problems they come into. And that's how that works. So if you look at Blackwater, what's going on with Blackwater right now, that is full spectrum practical politics. That is how things is done now. That's how opponents are taken out and things like that. And Blackwater, probably, I don't know what all they did. I mean, I've heard some things, but I'm sure none of it would be good eventually for the people running Blackwater. Depending on what they want to do, they may just want to take out a couple groups here, a couple people at the top, or take it over, or buy it out. Who knows what they have planned for Blackwater? They have a lot of assets now. But watch that. That is full spectrum practical politics right in front of your face. Taking down an opponent by any means necessary, using the law, but never breaking it. And it may just be a reorganization, but they are catching heat. They've been catching heat ever since the beginning of Obama's administration. And it isn't just Democrats. There's other groups involved too, but the neocon, anything neocon, post-Bush is just taking heat. Most people think Bush was that bad. Bush, in my opinion, didn't have any power. Presidents are just figurehead. You have to look at the people around him. The people around Bush were pathetic. Bush was just a guy, a mouthpiece. But in fact, Bush himself, I've heard from good sources, wasn't near as 1/1,000,000th as evil as the people around him. And Cheney was sitting there running everything. But that is a case of full spectrum practical politics right in front of your face. Everyone sees the stuff, but they don't know what they're looking at. But that's how things are done now. No one's getting shot in the head, no assassinations, but you certainly can use the law to take people out. Sure. It's done all the time. And I'm going to do a brief overview on economics. A piece came across my desk that's kind of interesting, but it kind of illustrates my point about how much race matters when it comes to economics and whatnot. Sprott Asset Management, SPROTT, Asset Management, kicks out a report every now and then. It's interesting. They're out of Toronto, Ontario, and this came across my desk from an associate or a friend. Actually, it's a friend slash associate. But most of you, the stimulus is wearing off in America, and basically what it's saying is things are looking very, very bad this fall. But what it goes into is that they give, and I'm going to read right from this Sprott Asset Management, and they got a website, www.sprott.com. And China deserves special attention here because on a percentage of GDP basis, they are far and away the greatest stimulator of all. They're talking about all the economic stimulation of late. While the U.S. has made significant commitments, their $2.8 trillion capital deployment to date only represents a mere 20% of their GDP, 2008 GDP. Chinese government spending combined with Chinese bank lending, on the other hand, is completely unprecedented in the history of banking and far outweighs the U.S. stimulus in scale and scope. The Chinese have deployed 4 trillion yuan in stimulus spending through 2010. So in effect, the Chinese have injected a stimulus